There have been a lot of van projects, and many of them have taken quite some time to finally get completed, but none of them went on as long as the project I'm showing you today. Okay.
Should have brought the knife.
Yeah, we should have. So today, we're gonna be taking these, unwrapping them, and then cutting them to size. So, I'm gonna bring this over here so that it can kind of see what we're doing. But first things first is we just gotta take one of these, unwrap it, and then trace it out. Over a year ago, when I first got my van, I knew I wanted to update the side panels. The side panels on this van had worn down pretty badly. They were sticky and gross and definitely needed to be updated. So I went to the store and got some thin plywood boards, and with my friends Trevin and Logan, we spent the day tracing side panels and cutting them out. Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, don't forget to mark out the square hole back half of it.
Well, so this is an ashtray, and I don't smoke, so that thing. One down and several more to go. Now I won't make you sit here and watch us cut each and every side panel out, but this project did take a whole day to complete. Once all the side panels for the van were almost done, there were only two more to finish up. The side panels for the driver and passenger side doors. See, one big reason I wanted to update these side panels was, yes, they were old and worn down, but some of them were safety hazards. This one, for example, had screws protruding out of the door.
What? Okay, so what is the story of these?
I have no idea.
Like, why and then why? Like, they're put in there, and then they were left in there.
Yeah.
The fact they poke through like this is my favorite part.
Yeah, it's kind of silly. I don't know what in the world they would have been for.
Yeah, I don't know.
Believe it or not, there was a reason for these screws here. See, these Vanagons normally come with a pocket in the door, and the one on the passenger side had probably worn down and broken off. So instead of removing the screws from the door, whoever ripped that pocket out just left them in there in case they ever wanted to put a new pocket back in. Nice idea, but a safety hazard nonetheless, and I can't tell you how many times I scratched myself on this freaking thing. The guy who sold me this van should have included a free tetanus shot, but either way. After we got our boards cut, it was now time to take a bandsaw and cut the pieces into more accurate shapes. Once that was done, I took the boards home and sanded them down, and for almost a full year, I never touched them. See, the problem with installing the side panels was as follows. First thing I would have had to do was insulate the van. Once the van was insulated, I could put in the side panels. However, I wanted to cut the side panels out in such a way that they would also be able to house my sound system, and I couldn't work on the sound system until the dash had been remastered. So instead of making progress on this, I decided to wait until the dash was remastered before I finished up this project. Now that the dash has been torn through and rebuilt, I was finally able to work on my side panels, and this is where the project actually begins. Now, I have a specific theme going for my van. It wasn't intentional, but a theme nonetheless. When I got my laminate floor, I got some damaged boards for $20, and this gray is beautiful to me. With the side panels, I wanted to have them match that color, so I went to the store and bought some stain. Then my mother and I took some paintbrushes and we went to work. Now you may ask, Barry, you said you got gray stain, right? Why does that stain look so blue? And you can judge me all you like. This was a pretty dumb mistake on my part. See, when I went to the store, I was looking for stain, but instead of reading the color, I just looked at the picture that was on the can. The stain can looked gray, but the color was a deep blue, and it was only after we finished the boards that I'd realized the color was not going to wash out. Great. So I recut these panels, went back to the store, got the right color, and then we went to work again. This time they turned out a lot better. We spent hours staining every board, and that color was a lot closer to the gray wood laminate that I had on my floor. However, there were two problems. Firstly, some of the boards were cut in such a way that a few of the panels had grain that was vertical, while others were running horizontal, and that wasn't exactly symmetrical. This would have looked a bit strange in the van, and I wanted the grain to wrap around the van to match the floor. This meant that I would either need to cut new side panels again, but I also noticed that the stain here wasn't an exact match. Some of the wood I'd used was a bit more red, while other panels were a light yellow, which threw the color off in the end. At first, I didn't know what to do, until I went on Amazon and found some laminate wrap, and in the end, I decided to wrap my panels with that. The color would match better, the grain would lead wherever I'd want it to, and I no longer had to spend so much time recutting and painting new side panels. Plus, if they ever got worn down, all I'd have to do was wrap them up again. So, with the help of my good buddy Trevin, we spent a couple days wrapping the side panels and getting them all nice and ready to be placed. The process was pretty simple. Once the panel was wrapped, we flipped it over and cut off the residual wrap that wasn't attached to the board. Then I took a sanding block and brushed the edges of the panels to really grind off whatever remained. Beyond that, it was wash, rinse, repeat. We even sprayed the boards with glue to really make sure the laminate would stick down, and after this, my side panels were dressed up, and at least in this regard, they were finished. This moves us into the next stage of the project. In order to actually put the side panels into place, we first needed to insulate the van. I went to the store and bought some rock wool insulation, and I went with this stuff for a few reasons. Firstly, it's designed for sound dampening, which will be really helpful when I'm trying to record videos on the road. Secondly, this stuff is heat resistant up to 2,000 degrees, which means it'll help me keep cool in the warm months and warm in the colder months. Plus, if there's a fire, I should be able to leave the van before I'm burned alive. Fingers crossed on that one. Alright, so it's a little dark, so we're using a flashlight, so sorry if there's some flicker here. But the other day, Trevin and I started installing the panels in my van. So we're actually taking insulation here. This is rock wool, soundproof and fire resistant up to like 18 billion degrees. And we're actually going through and installing the insulation into the side panels. We'll work on these once the sound system is actually implemented. So we're just doing the ones that we can for now, but we got the two in the other day and it looks awesome. So we're going to show you how we're installing these and yeah, go through the process. All we had to do was rip the insulation into small pieces, tuck them into place, and then we could screw holes into the side panels and lock them in. I had the idea of using magnets to stick them to the metal of the van, but even neodymium magnets wouldn't secure the panels to the body. After a few hours of work, almost all the panels were in place. So, let me run you through the process real quick. After the van had been insulated behind the panel, we then took that panel and lined it up with the old ones that had previously been in there. We marked where the holes went, drilled them out, then took that drill and drilled into the existing holes in the body to open them up a bit. After that, I took riv nuts and screwed them into place with Adam's riv nutter. By the way, thank you so much, Adam, for letting us borrow this. After our rivets were in place, we could then take our panels and screw them in. In all, not really a tough job, just took a lot of time, and honestly the hardest part was lining up the holes from the old boards onto the new panels. Most of them didn't actually line up when we finally got them against the body of the van. All this took was grinding the holes out with my Dremel, and almost all the boards were finally in place. Now Barry, you may ask, why didn't you put all the boards in place at the same time? And that's what gets us into the final part of this protracted project. Back when I was working at Best Buy, I got myself a JBL sound system for my car. I bought a subwoofer, 4 6x9 speakers, an amp, and I even got a new doubled-in Alpine deck. When I bought my van, I decided to sell my car and put this sound system in the bus instead. Alright, so I know it looks like a mess, but today is a pretty exciting day. We got my speaker system all unboxed and taken apart. So I have a sub box over here. There's gonna be a subwoofer in there. I've got that new deck right over there next to Trevin, right in front of you, buddy. There you go. We got some wires over here to connect to the battery. We've got our amp, which is actually right over here, this guy. This guy we've decided we're gonna fit right under there, under the front driver's seat, since the battery is right over there on the other side. And then we've got two JBL speakers, two JBL tweeters, the JBL sub.
They're not tweeters.
What are they, goddammit?
They're speakers.
Oh, they're...
This little thing in the middle is a tweeter.
That's what I was talking about. I have two of these. There's a speaker around them, but I got two of those. All right, anyway. I know what I'm talking about. A crap load of speaker wire, and then all these other miscellaneous cords here. So we're gonna spend some time and try to find out where all of this needs to go. And we're gonna spend most of the time just working on it, and I'll come in periodically with updates and show you guys what we're up to. So let's begin. Now, I don't need to go full-blown into the ins and outs of how we got this project done. That would make this video hours long, and I mostly just want to show off the end result. So, to get there, here's what we did. First thing was we put the amp under the driver's seat and hooked it up to the battery. There was a hole in the seat bucket that led through the center console, and into the other bucket where the battery sits. Once that was hooked up, we then had to run speaker wire through the dash and then down to the amp. Two of the speakers would be mounted in the front doors, while the other two had to be mounted in the back. After running speaker wire through the dash and to the back of the van, we then had to run one other wire for the subwoofer. Alright, so an update. So yesterday my buddy and I ran the wires from the amp, which is underneath my seat right there, up to the dash. So they go under the floor here, on actually both sides the wires go up, and then out through the dash, and then that's basically the bulk of them right there. There's some speaker wire that runs to the doors that we'll have to route through, but today is going to be about running these speakers right there to the back sides of the van. Last night we actually hooked up the subwoofer, went out into the middle of a field and just blasted the thing to see how it would work, and she screams. So I'm really excited to finally have some music playing along with that bass. So let's see how that goes. After spending a decent amount of time routing wire under the floor of the van, crimping butt connectors to the speakers, and plugging everything in, we finally had a working sound system. The only thing left was to find a way to mount the speakers into the front doors of the van and into the rear walls. So we headed off to our local metal fabrication shop and went to work. Now, normally you're not allowed to just waltz into a metal shop and use their tools, but this shop actually belongs to Trevin's father, so he let us use it for the weekend. So the speaker system's almost done, but we need to get them up into the side of the van. So we're going to be making some brackets with some of this metal in here, and we got a bunch of welding equipment here for that. So we're going to be giving that a shot. We started off with the speakers for the front doors. If you notice here, we couldn't get the speaker to actually fit properly. So these goddamn speakers won't get in the goddamn door. So we need to cut off the goddamn top. All this took was cutting the arms off the top of both of the front speakers, and they popped into the door no problem. So we ran this speaker wire down through the door, had to drill some holes into the door so that it would feed out into this opening, which is where we're going to put this speaker. Now I'm going to go around the other side of the van because we've done the same thing over here, which was a bit more of a pain. There's like a jumbled mess in there, but the wire goes down into the door, drilled another hole in there, and feeds out into this slot where we're gonna put the speaker. All right, so this first speaker is in here solid. Now, obviously, it's not hooked up yet, so we're gonna have to remove it, but we wanted to see if this worked. So we grabbed this small plastic bushing here, this little spacer, and then some, what were these, sheet metal screws?
Yeah.
So we got 3 sheet metal screws that are locking the speaker down to the body of the van. And that's as simple as that was to get this into place. Now, while I was working on the front of the van, my buddy Trevin was making brackets for the rear speakers to fit, and these were a huge project to tackle. Essentially, he took a rectangular piece of aluminum and welded 2 small aluminum arms to it. These arms would stand off the bracket and end up flush with the speaker so that they could be screwed in, while the backside of the bracket would fit into the walls of the van and be secured in that way. This was a big project since you need 4 brackets in total and they all had to be the perfect length to hold on to the speakers. But after a few days of work, Trevin got all the brackets done, secured them into place, and the rear speaker project was complete. After that, I cut out speaker holes in the panels for the front doors and we screwed those into place as well. So, quick explanation of what we're doing right now. We got this that Trevin brilliantly made, a stencil, so that we could mark out where our speaker would go, which I have right here. The speaker will fit right in there almost perfectly. We just need to sand it down a little bit after. So, instead of using the stencil to cut this one, I'm gonna line this one up with this. I have to flip it over. And we're going to trace out the door handle, the window crank, not the old speaker, but the new speaker, which I'm about to do right now. So, let's begin. Okay. With that, the speaker project was complete. Now, I need to go back a bit because there was one step we did before we had the brackets in, and that was finding a permanent home for the sub box. We figured the back corner of the van would be a good spot for it. Before we popped it into place though, we went out and got some polyfill and threw that into the sub box. For those of you who don't know, if you line your sub box with polyfill, which is essentially pillow stuffing, this little trick gives the subwoofer a lower frequency response and the end result is a boomier sound. After the box was lined with the polyfill, we threw some Velcro on the bottom of the box just in case we ever needed to move it, and threw it into place. So, let's go over what we've done real quick. The amp is hooked up under my seat, all the speakers are in their proper places, the sub box is secured down to the floor, but there was one last thing that we needed to do. See, my dash has a spot for a single DIN deck. However, when I bought this speaker system, I purchased an Alpine double DIN for my car. I had to find a way to get this larger deck into my van, and what Barry Bus video would be complete without the help of Adam. The first part of this project was quite simple. Adam took some cardboard and using the dash and the Alpine, made a quick little bracket to get an idea of how he could secure this thing down. After his measurements were done, he took some diamond-plated steel and marked the pieces out on that. He then cut the pieces and welded them together to form the bracket. Once the deck housing was formed, Adam now needed some arms to come off the sides of it so it could be bolted to the dash. So he cut himself some pieces and welded those on. Now that the bracket was a complete piece, Adam sanded it down and popped the deck inside. Perfect fit. Now, for you Vanagon goers out there, this next step might seem a bit blasphemous. Adam started cutting into the dash to open up the single DIN so he could mount his bracket. There's probably a few of you out there going, "No, what are you doing? This is a crime," but I tell you what, I would happily sin to have my double DIN. Once the dash had been cut open, he taped the deck and drilled holes into the arms. He then used those holes to mark where he'd need to drill into the dash. Adam then drilled his holes and using his riv nutter popped in some rivets and screwed the housing into place. Now you may wonder why he taped up the deck. Well, once the Alpine was in the housing, it was so tight that it wouldn't come out, and of course I wanted to spray paint the housing to match the dash a bit better. After that, we put the Alpine back into place, and my speaker system was complete. I can't tell you how nice it is to have an updated sound system in the van. It even has Bluetooth, and last weekend I went camping and hooked up my laptop to the sound system and had my own little drive-in theater experience. This is way better than the speakers that came with the van. This Vanagon was made in '82 and the sound quality is from the '60s.
Is the speaker mounted to the cardboard?
It looks like it is!
Oh, it's so flat! Look at that thing! Wow. Yeah, that's shit.
When we tore those out, I had nothing but a Bluetooth JBL speaker as my music device. And it was great, but sometimes it would cut out or just not connect at all. I got so mad at it I threw it in a lake. At least now it's sinking. Bye guys.